Hello there, welcome to Point of View. I'm Mark Leishman. Well, one of the biggest and sometimes most challenging issues facing farms is succession. Traditionally, the eldest son getting the farm and the others all missing out, or as is often the case these days, the eldest son getting the farm and then having to pay out to his siblings. Well, Ian Blackman is a lawyer and author from BlackmanSpargo in Rotorua, and he's an expert really in succession planning, and he joins us now. Ian, welcome to Point of View.
Thanks, Mark.
That traditional sense, that's true, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Basically,
very much so. I was with the Rural Bank before I went into private practice, and a number of Rural Bank clients talked to me about the fact that the boy was getting the farm, and if the girls want to go farming, they have to marry a farmer down the valley. So it was very much a
cut and dried.
Yep.
And then the oldest wouldn't have to hand over any money or pay them out or anything like that?
And often it was the reason that the Rural Bank was involved is that we required the parents to leave money in on a second mortgage. Right. And so there was debt owed, but of course if the son got into difficulty, it was extremely difficult for the parents to actually call up the debt. So it was pretty much an interest-free loan that if they could repay, they did, and if they couldn't, they didn't.
So what has changed these days? Because it has changed quite dramatically.
I think there's been a real paradigm shift in, I think, the attitude of farmers about being fair to all the children. And I think that attitude has been driven in large part by influence from the urban community that are saying to farmers, rightly or wrongly, from their own urban perspective, look, every child is entitled to an equal share of the inheritance, and if it's a farm, then it's an equal share of the value of the land in the farm.
But of course a farm is nowadays worth a huge amount of money, isn't it? So
millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And if a farmer either buys into that point of view, which I don't personally share as an expert in the rural sector, I don't share the view that the distribution needs to be equal. I do think that the distribution needs to be fair, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later on. But if the farmer fails to do anything at all and dies, and when the surviving spouse dies, then the farm will inevitably be sold because the succeeding child will never have the means at the date of the death of the surviving parent to purchase the farm.
So, in your view, what is the answer?
I think the answer in simple terms is planning. And my book called Keeping Farming in the Family and tells the story as it is, which is how do we in New Zealand keep farming families on pastoral land, is about how you put together a plan as early as possible to ensure that succession is successful, that the parents are looked after financially and emotionally, and also that the non-succeeding children are treated fairly. It's all about planning.
Now, I mean, as I say, we've got the issue of the cost of the farm, the value of the farm, should I say. You've got elderly parents, and you've got a bunch of siblings, and what in the old days, you were as the oldest son, you're in prime position because you got everything. Yeah. Now you're between a rock and a hard place, really, in some ways.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's very difficult often for the parents to devise a plan. I talk about planning, but what is the plan? How do they achieve the solution to the conundrum that's created by expectant non-succeeding children wanting significant amount of capital from the farm that they feel they have a moral entitlement to, and ensure that the farm stays in the family and succeeds again to the next generation, which is often emotionally what the parents want. How do you do that? Well, you start planning, in my view, by putting together a legal structure that enables the farm to be sold, not gifted, to the succeeding child over a long period of time, often decades. And having the right legal structure to do that is absolutely essential.
Is it trusts, or are they limited liability companies?
Yeah, I'm absolutely certain that it's companies. We've been saying that for 15 years, and I think there's been a groundswell of opinion with the legal and accounting profession that we've been right all this time, even though I'm told by my banking friends that over 50% of farmland in New Zealand is still owned by discretionary trust, which I think is a major problem.
So what can you highlight the differences?
The difference is that a discretionary trust, which is a family trust that owns land, ensures that on the death of the surviving spouse, the trust deed almost invariably says that the trust is to be wound up and the proceeds or the assets of the trust are to be distributed equally to the final beneficiaries, and they are invariably described as being all of the surviving children.
Right, right.
So
that means loss of the farm.
Essentially, it's not going to work.
Yeah. And then the limited...
If you own the land and the trading assets, such as the livestock and the plant and machinery in a limited liability company, it gives the parents who own shares in that limited liability company the opportunity to sell small parts of the farm by selling shares in the company to the succeeding child over a period of 10, 20, 30 years.
Right, right.
And that makes it affordable for the succeeding child, because as they make money and they save money, they have the opportunity of paying for the shares, and that gives the financial security that the parents are looking for, each 2 or 3 years receiving a large capital sum, which gives them the opportunity of doing up the kitchen, buying the new car, or going on an overseas trip.
Right.
And if there's money left over from that, it gives them the opportunity at the time that the non-succeeding children need it to maybe lend or gift some money to the non-succeeding children.
So where does that leave the non-succeeding children at this point, though? Does that still favour the eldest? Or the...
I don't think it does, looked at from a rural perspective. I think there would be some in the urban sector that would say that it's not fair because it's not equal, and there are certainly a large number of non-succeeding children that might initially have that view, but if you sit down and examine it closely, I think the commitment that the succeeding child is making to a career in farming, getting up at night, dealing with the weather, working physically hard, earning very little, because there's often, certainly in sheep and beef farming, not much return on the capital. If you look at the commitment that they're making, which is a commitment for a lifetime, then I think it's fair that instead of the farm being distributed equally, there is an unequal distribution, but one which the parents consider as fair. And my view is that it's the parents that need to make this decision, not the non-succeeding children.
Right.
And I think one of the mistakes that's been made in this industry, and it's not the way that I think it should be done, is that a lot of advisors in the succession planning field are saying, let's all get round the table and talk about it. That is tantamount to saying we need your permission. At the point that the parents say to the non-succeeding children, we need your permission, is the point where you've lost the plot. And you have a talk fest for 5 years and nothing gets done.
Because no one can agree.
No one can
feels
agree.
It's fair, and
So what
and
I
the parents look as though they're favouring one over the others. All this sort of, I can see the dynamics.
But what I do is effectively coach the parents to say, who owns the farm, who's responsible for making decision, who's leading this family, how are you going to do it? And I recommend that they, with advice from me and the accountant, and with consultation with a succeeding child who needs to buy into the business proposition, that they put a plan together and then ask for feedback, not for permission, from the non-succeeding children. That is vital. I've done hundreds of plans, they've all been successful. We've put them in place relatively easily because we've taken that approach.
And we're talking long-term, slowly,
Exactly.
Yeah,
at a point where at the end of the day, if you're talking about equality, if the surviving parent lives for 30 years, then by the time the surviving parent or both parents pass away, the shares in the company have been purchased by the succeeding child, and and the assets that the parents own are distributed equally.
So what are some of the, I suppose, the sad stories? What, some of the examples of things where they've gone horribly wrong?
Well, the reason for writing the book is I was reading cases where families were forever destroyed because of a failure to plan, and part of that is a failure to get proper advice. And I saw a paucity of information in the community, and so I said, I started working from the rural bank in the rural sector. I obviously specialised in it, one of the biggest problems that my farming clients had was succession. I found a way of doing it and thought, I've got to share this with the whole rural community. But and I wrote it for farmers. It's an easy read, but we're finding that half of the books are being sold to lawyers and accountants, and so I'm really pleased about that. You know, I'm passionate about helping the rural community, and the book is all about helping them. And I've had some fantastic feedback from farming families.
Good stuff. My guest is Ian Blackman. The book is Keeping Farming in the Family, a Guide to Succession Planning. And we'll be back with more from Ian right after this on Point of View.